Hello, I'm Courtney Burke, Commissioner of the New York State Office for People with Developmental Disabilities. It's my pleasure to introduce you to the OPWDD Fire Safety Level 1 training that is being provided to you on this DVD. The Fire Safety Level 1 training has been developed in collaboration with OPWDD and the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services Offices of Fire Prevention and Control. This OFPC partnership provides our agency with an enhanced level of fire safety expertise dedicated to the safety of the individuals with developmental disabilities we support and serve and that of our employees. Fire Safety Level 1 is one of the first in what will be a series of trainings on this topic devoted to OPWDD's commitment to protecting the lives of individuals in our care. The OPWDD Level 1 Fire Safety Training's overall purpose is to fully educate our employees on the topic of fire so they are properly prepared to not only prevent fires from happening, but in the event of a fire, to safely evacuate the people in our care. This training focuses on the following three areas of fire safety. First, awareness. Second, prevention. And third, evacuation execution. This 3-hour DVD was created to be used by provider agency and DDSO fire safety instructors to educate the employees and managers responsible for the people in our care. In closing, this Fire Safety Level 1 training truly supports OPWDD's mission. We help people with developmental disabilities live richer lives. I want to thank you for your continued efforts towards educating our employees to make our system of care the safest it can be.
My name is Guy Swartout. I'm Deputy Chief for the East Region Office of Fire Prevention and Control, which is in the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services. Just a little bit of background. I have 22 years in the fire service, 16 years as Chief of Pottersville Volunteer Fire Department, exit 26 off the Northway. I've got 9 years with the Office of Fire Prevention and Control, and my supervisory territory, I joke about it being point to point. I have responsibility for all of the colleges and universities from Montauk Point on Long Island to Rouse's Point on the Canadian border and the west side of St. Lawrence and Fulton counties. So we've got 13 people that work directly for me in that area, doing college inspections, a large amount of student and administration and staff training for the college program. We also are involved with the State Office of Department of Environmental Conservation. We do a lot of training with them as well. NYPA, we are responsible for the tracks within the NYRA program because that's state property. So just a wide variety of things that we're involved in. And for the past, Bob, Don, probably 8 months, we've been working together on a training program for OPW and their programs and the voluntaries to try to bring fire safety into a higher profile, if you will, within the agency. So that's what we're doing today. On Saturday, March 21st in 2009, a fire occurred at the Riverview IRA, Sunmount DDSO, that literally changed the world of residential board and care in New York State. The fire claimed the lives of 4 consumers, injured 2 others, and a staff member was hurt. What's interesting about that facility is that it was the newest and best in the entirety of the state program. It was less than a year old. The fire occurred, and the fire caused the death of 4 consumers. Since that time, there have been policy changes. There has been work with buildings. There have been new people brought on board to work with the program in the area of fire safety. There have been changes in procedures. There have been changes in a lot of things that have happened. But the question still remains, could wells happen again? And I would start this morning by challenging you that that answer very much depends on you. Whether or not an incident like wells occurs again is more a behavioral issue, more related to you as a staff person than truly it is in building construction codes and policy. So what we want to do in the next little while, through the course of our training program this morning, is not necessarily assign you specific actions or specific step-by-step moves to take within the fire safety program. But what we would like to do is give you some decision-making tools, help make you aware of what fire is, how fire behaves, the consequences of fire, and help you understand the reality of how fire occurs in the types of properties where you work. We would like to give you some decision-making tools that should the fire emergency occur, you know how to respond. You can make the right choices to do the right things for your personal safety and also for the sake of your consumers. We also would like to emphasize the greater importance of fire prevention, because if the fire doesn't happen in the first place, we don't have to deal with the consequences of the event. So that's where we're headed this morning. A couple of instructor goals. I hope that we will give you a high-quality presentation that you believe was worth your time. We would like to give you information that you can use every day, and while this is a work-related training session, I believe that you will take some things away from this program that you can use in your home life as well and provide a greater measure of safety for yourself and your family. We'd like to give you some good decision-making tools to correctly respond to an emergency. We already talked about that. And then perhaps in the next few minutes, some of you may have some of your preconceived ideas about fire shattered or changed. Almost always when we do fire safety programs, somebody walks away from that program saying, I never knew that, I never realized I need to do something differently. Because of preconceived ideas they had about fire, about the consequence of fire that were changed because of information given in the program. I do a lot of teaching for campus programs, and was involved in a national program where we were teaching college administrators and facilities managers, residence life leaders, those kind of people. And about halfway through the program in the morning, this lady came up during the break and she says, guys, I have to tell you, this is nothing personal, but I have to leave. And I'm getting nervous. What did we do? How did we offend her? She says, no, it was nothing like that. I sat here as a college administrator, and as you went through the program this morning, I suddenly transitioned to a mom with 2 girls who are living in off-campus property as college students. And she says, I have to go make some phone calls and tell my girls what I just learned. So I think maybe there'll be some things this morning that you will pick up on, some things that you might change in your own behavior, your own approach to fire, but also in relationship to your consumers and to your facilities where you work. They come from a variety of backgrounds. They come to your facilities for a variety of reasons. All of them come with personal expectations. All of them come with family expectations. All of them come with agency or provider expectations. But all of them come to you, and when they get there, they're in your hands. What you do as a staff member literally can mean the difference between life and death in the life of your consumers. John Kennedy said this in 1963, I speak to you today not of your rights as Americans, but of your responsibilities. They are many in number and different in nature. They do not rest with equal weight upon the shoulders of all. Equality of opportunity does not mean equality of responsibility. All Americans must be responsible citizens, but some must be more responsible than others by virtue of their public or private position, their role in the family or community, their prospects for the future, or their legacy from the past. Increased responsibility goes with increased ability. For those to whom much is given, much is required. And as a staff member, you are in that position. It is literally impossible to overemphasize the impact that you have in fire safety on the consumers for whom you are responsible. You are the most critical person in fire safety for your client group. First thing I'd like to call to your attention is you're not firefighters. Now some of you may say, yes I am, I belong to whatever fire department. That's cool, but in the context of your job, you need to remember that you're not firefighters. The average staff person has no fire training. They do not have the gear, the knowledge, the equipment, any of those resources which would allow them to be firefighters. Now what does that mean? What does the firefighter do in a fire emergency? He's working on putting out the fire. He's working on rescuing people who are in imminent danger. He's working on trying to conserve property, and we'll talk about all of those kind of things. The staff person, you as a staff person, are not trained or equipped to do any of those things. And we'll talk about some of that as we go through the program in this first hour. There are severe life-threatening issues in a fire emergency which you cannot handle. You are not a firefighter. So that does a couple of things. First of all, when there is any suspicion of fire, we need to get the fire department coming immediately because we need them there to perform their professional functions. However, having said that you're not a firefighter, we have to go back and say you are the first responders. There's a national standard that says a fire department should be able to respond within 6 minutes. If you live in a rural area or a place where a volunteer fire department exists, the likelihood of having someone actually on scene at your facility in 6 minutes is small to none. There are some that are able to do that, very few are able to do that. That means that for the period of identifying the fire or pulling the alarm, from that time until the fire department arrives, which could be 6, 10, 12, 15 minutes, you are the first responders. And the reality is that what you do in those first 6, 7, 8, 9 minutes has a greater impact than anything else that will occur during the lifetime of that emergency. Your proper decisions can mean life and death for your consumers. Your proper decisions can mean your own safety. Because the fire department will not be there to execute those functions for you. You have to do the right things. You have to follow the evacuation plan. You have to make those events happen which provide that safety. Because you're on your own. You are the first responders for those first few minutes of the fire incident. This may sound like an exaggeration. This may look like something that is overstated. This is hyperbole. It's not. Literally, fire is a matter of life and death. And Wells proves that. Other programs have proved that in the tragedies that have occurred. And we need to make that a focal point that fire safety is a critical matter that can mean life or death. The United States has the best buildings in the world, the best code system to build those buildings, the best trained, the best equipped of fire departments in the world. Yet in spite of that, we kill an unacceptable number of people year after year after year after year after year. Does anybody know how many fire deaths there are in the United States in a given year, approximately? 3,000 to 4,000, exactly right. We kill 3,000 to 4,000 people every year because of fire. We injure far more than that. In 2000, America at Risk, the FEMA agency, wrote, America today has the highest fire losses in terms of both frequency and total losses of any modern technological society. Anything that's not a third world country has less fire deaths than the United States of America. In spite of the fact that we have the best built buildings, the best trained and equipped fire departments in the world, and the best codes on the planet. Why is that? Because most of the fire deaths that occur, most of the things that happen that cause death and injury are the result of human behavior. And we have some myths and some things that we accept or believe about fire that just are not true, which cause that. And that's still true 11 years later. Here are some of the statistics. Fire last year, over 3,000 deaths, 18,000 civilian injuries occurred as a result of fire, 115 firefighters were killed while on duty. 84%, and this is significant to you because 84% of civilian fire deaths occurred in residences. The place where people thought they were safest, right? Where do I think I'm safest? I think I'm safest in my home. The reality is, in a fire context, in the world of fire, that is the place where you're least likely to be safe. Unless you do the right things, unless you take some precautions, make some things happen to provide a measure of fire safety in your home. 1.6 million fires were reported, many, many more were not reported. Over $15 billion in direct property damage, 32,000 intentionally set structure fires resulted in 315 civilian deaths. And every 2.5 hours, statistically, someone dies in a fire. That means while we're in this program, before we go to lunch, someone will have died statistically in a fire in the United States. And that happens every 2.5 hours every day. Individuals in the OPWDD consumer demographic are 5 times more likely than the general population to die in a fire. Why is that?
ability to evacuate themselves, that would be able to respond to.
Okay. Okay. The ability to, first of all, react and respond, to recognize the problem, and then to function to evacuate or function to do the right things in response to that? Any other reasons?
Medical or physical conditions.
Okay, medical or physical conditions. Just the inability to be able to self-preserve in some way. I was talking to Perry before we started. One of the issues is that folks in this population are the third highest risk. The fire issue is a threat to them, the third highest rate of all of the population. Number one is little kids. Number two is old folks. And number three is the people that you work with, the people that you work for in your homes and your residences. And then we were talking about the fact, and he suggested that if you start combining those things, where you have a 70 or 80-year-old or 94-year-old consumer with developmental disabilities, as well as the age component, the likelihood of a fire threatening their life or the fire costing their life becomes exponentially higher. Fire safety problem in the United States, what is it? The problem that we have is we don't believe we have a problem. People are not willfully opposed to the issue of fire safety. They just don't even think about it. It never crosses their mind. How many people do you know that on a regular basis actually do? Everybody knows Edith, right? Exit drills in the home, where you take your kids, you draw a map of the house, you have them practice the exits, you have them practice getting out, crawling low, going to a second exit, those kind of things. How many people do you know that actually do that? And how many people do you know actually even think about that possibility? They probably aren't sitting there saying, oh no, we're not going to do this at home, we don't think this is the right thing to do. They probably never even think about it. And the problem we have in the United States is that the fire safety problem, or the fire problem, is we don't believe we have a problem. We think that fire is something that happens to somebody else, somewhere else. It's some kind of a natural disaster or something that occurs that we have no control over. There's nothing we can do about it. And in the United States, fire deaths are somehow seen as just an acceptable loss. In other countries, that's not true. In Japan, if you have a fire, you're shamed to the point of very often the family moves to another town because of what has occurred when they had a fire. We have fundraisers, and the generosity of people in the United States is such, and that's a really good thing, that we try to help out the family, but there never seems to be a consequence on the other end for the fact that maybe some bad choices caused that incident. 1987 to 1999, there were 25 deaths from entrapment in auto trunks. October 17th of 2000, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration issued a report to Congress, and as a result of that report to Congress, because of 25 deaths, every single car that's sold in the United States today has a trunk release so that a person trapped in the trunk can pull it from the inside and escape. 25 deaths, 1987 to 1998. In that same time period, 58,395 people died in fire, and the government attention was zip. The fire problem is we don't believe we have a problem. We think that it's something that we can't do anything about, and that's just not true. How many of you remember this incident? 12 miners were killed in the Sago mine, Tallmansville, West Virginia. How long was that on the news? Weeks. Literally a couple of weeks. Now, I don't want to diminish the tragedy at all, because I can't even begin to imagine what it must be like to be trapped underground in a mine and know full well what that business is, and know that the best efforts of my people on top of ground are very, very, very unlikely to save me. That's horrible. I can't even begin to imagine that. But that incident was on the news for a matter of weeks. As recently as 6 or 7 months ago, I heard a news report that talked about money that was being provided by the federal government for mine safety and legislation that was passed related to mine safety, and they referenced Sago Mine as the incident that precipitated that action. During that same weekend, the middle weekend of those 2 weeks when Sago was on the news, 20 people died in fires. 9 of them in one incident. 6 of those 9 were children. Who heard about that? National news coverage, international news coverage about miners trapped, 12 deaths in a mine. But 20 people died, 9 in a single incident, 6 of them kids. And the only place anybody heard about that was the local news where the incident happened. Why? The fire problem is we don't believe we have a problem. 29 miners were killed Monday, April 5th, 2010 in Raleigh County, West Virginia. Again, headlines, international headlines, as far away as New Zealand. My sister lives in Australia. She's been there for about 32 years, married an Aussie. And they called up and said, we just heard about what was happening in the United States. It made the press over there. The president and vice president attended the memorial service. Right thing to do, no question. Again, horrible tragedy. But did you know that that day, 20 people died in residential fires in the United States? And that week, from Monday to Friday, while that was in the news and while the president and vice president were attending the memorial service, 45 people died in fires in the United States. The fire problem is we don't believe we have a problem. The reality is fire is by far the greatest but least recognized safety threat to the population of the United States, and that is greater in the context in which you work. Fire kills more Americans than all natural disasters combined. Let's look at this time period, 1998 to 2008. How many people do you think died in tornadoes, natural disaster deaths? How many do you think there might have been?
600.
600, all right? Anybody else? Higher? Lower? Think he's close? A little bit lower? Okay, toss Chris the prize. All right? that works. Okay? 609. All right. How about hurricanes? Just shoot me a number.
Is this Katrina too?
Yes. Yeah, we included Katrina in this. 2126, and 1,100 of those were related to Katrina, all right? More than 1,100. Okay, earthquakes? 3 people.
In the world?
In the United States. In the United States. 3 people in the 10-year period, 98 to 2008. 3 people died of earthquakes. That's a total of 2,738, and that includes Katrina, as was already mentioned. Those are the things that made the news. Those are the things that were in the national papers. Those are the things that were in the international papers. Those were the things that TV, radio, and every other media internet outlet broadcast. 10-year period, 1998 to 2008, we killed 46,900 people in fire in that same time period. And the only people that knew about that were the people in the towns where the incident actually occurred. The fire problem is we don't believe we have a problem. Put it in this context. If 2 cruise ships sank every year, somebody would pay attention, somebody would do something. And that's exactly what we're doing with the fire death rate every year. The difference is that unlike natural disasters, we can prevent the fire deaths from happening. We can do something that makes them not occur. We can prevent those losses. In fact, I'm going to step out on a limb here. The research that I've done and the work that we've done through OFPC, we believe that as much as 90% of all fire deaths did not have to happen. There were things that occurred that had some intervention taken place at some point in that track, in that timeline. Had something occurred in that timeline, 90% of those deaths would not have happened. 90% of those people did not have to die, because human error is the most significant factor in the cause and spread of fire. That's why in Japan, if you have a fire, you're disgraced, because 90% of the time you did something which caused that fire. Why do more than 3,000 Americans die every year in fire? It's because of bad choices. Somewhere in that timeline, somebody did something. Not willfully, I'm not saying it was a willful act, but somewhere in that timeline, somebody made a choice, somebody took an action which caused that event, which brought about the result. I would suggest also, we talk about the 3,000 plus people that die in fire every year. I would say those 18,000 that are injured by fire lose their lives too. Those gentlemen, two of whom I have met, went to college, experienced a college fire, and that was the result. They lost girlfriends. They lost family members who could not put up with or could not deal with the things that were going on by way of the pain and the treatment and the length of time all of those treatments took. They lost career possibilities. They lost the goals that they had had for their life when they went to school. I would suggest again that their life changed and that those who are injured by fire lose their life as well as those that are killed. People think they're safest in home. We already talked about this a little bit. The reality is that the risk of fire is greatest in one's home. And the risk of fire is greatest in the residences where your consumers live. Fire safety myths. Fire won't happen to me. Fires happen to other people. Fires are just something that happen. There's nothing we can really do about it. Both of those, obviously, are false. Another thing that happens very often is it's easy to become complacent about fire and its danger. It's easy to believe that because we've never had a fire death, we never will have a fire death. And the question we have to ask, and we do this in colleges all the time, the question we have to ask is, have you not had a fire or had a fire fatality because you're doing the right things? Or is it because you've been lucky? And the honest college president will tell me almost universally it's because we've been lucky. It's easy to become complacent. History or experience is not always a good teacher. Very often experience can lead us astray. Because we haven't had a fire, we believe we won't. Because we haven't had an injury, we believe we won't. And experience is not always a good teacher. Tomorrow, some of us may have to make split-second choices to save ourselves or our families or our consumers. How will we react? What will it feel like? Will we be heroes or victims? Will our upbringing, our gender, our personality, anything we've ever learned, thought, or dreamed of ultimately matter? And I would suggest that when we get done with the program this morning, that you will walk away being able to say, yes, there are things that we can do that will matter as we go back to work tomorrow. We need to discuss a little bit what is fire. And this is one of the places where some of those preconceptions that people have may be shattered a little bit. We may break the paradigm. The question is, what is fire? Well, fire is a rapid, persistent chemical change that releases heat and light and is accompanied by flame, especially the exothermic oxidation of combustible substance. I got it, right? And when I get done doing all of that, as impressive or unimpressive as that may be, everybody together says, so what? What difference does that make when I go to work tomorrow morning? What difference does that make in my life on a day-to-day basis? So what? Well, let's bring that down a little bit closer to us, something we can use a little bit more. When we talk about fire, the first issue is that fire is fast. And when we say fire is fast, we're talking about the development of the fire, how big it gets over what period of time. How often do you think, or over what time frame do you believe fire builds? Let's say fire doubles.
Every 30 seconds.
Every minute, every 30 seconds. When I started in the fire service, they told us that fire doubled every 1 minute. At that time, we were burning wood, cotton, linen, natural products, right? The things that were in our homes were pretty much natural materials. And the natural materials in a fire would double every 1 minute. 30 seconds is the right answer too, because now, 20 years later, 22 years later, from when I joined and when I took my first classes, what are we burning in our houses? What's everything in this room? Plastics. It's synthetic. What do we make plastics out of? It's a petroleum product. Literally, foam on the wall, station nightclub, can be what firefighters refer to as solid gasoline. It's the same stuff processed in a different way. So fire doubles every 30 seconds because of what we're burning, and literally everything, the carpeting, the furniture, the clothes we're wearing, the finishes on the wall, the ceiling tiles, everything is a synthetic product that doubles, fire doubles when it burns every 30 seconds. So what does that mean? That means that if I have a trash can on fire, 30 seconds from now, I have 2 trash cans. In a minute, I have 4. In a minute and a half, I have 8. In 2 minutes, I have 16. Another half minute, 32, 64, 128, 256, and that's as far as I go because I can't remember how many megabytes, gigabytes, whatever there are in my memory stick, right? It's that same exponential kind of progression. But what does that mean? That means that 2 minutes with the volume of fire of 16 trash cans, the temperature and the smoke in that room make that room totally unsurvivable. In a matter of 2 to 3 minutes, you can have a room fully involved in fire or even have extended into the rest of the residence in a way that makes that residence unsurvivable. So when we talk about evacuation times, what kind of numbers do we use for evacuation? How many minutes do we have to get out? If you ask the average person on the street how long they have to escape a fire, and this has been done in survey after survey after survey, you get answers of 5, 10, 15 minutes. Is that anywhere near real? No, it's not. The answer to how long do you have to get out of a fire situation or how long do you have to evacuate should a fire occur in your home, the answer is no time. I have no time to do anything except escape. I have to get out. I have to leave. That's why evacuation becomes so important. Now we'll talk a little bit about some of the components or some of the systems that can be put in place to expand that a little bit. But the reality is in the average home where we work, what are most of the facilities where your residences are? They're 1- and 2-family houses that have been converted for consumer use, right? So those fire safety systems, the sprinkler system, the building of areas of safety, areas of refuge, the construction components, those kind of things don't exist in those houses. And the answer is, how fast does fire progress? It progresses so fast that should a fire occur in my residence, I have no time to do anything but escape. The question you need to ask is, can I beat it to the door? The answer to that question is no, unless I do the right things immediately to affect survival. Fire is fast. Fire doubles every 30 seconds. We have no time to do anything but escape. Point number 2 about fire that a lot of people don't understand is that fire is hot. What do we see in the movies? We see the hero turnout coat. That's the uniform thing that the firefighter guys wear, right? Coat's open. He's holding the child, and he comes charging out of this room that's totally like massive. All you can see is fire behind him, right? And he's coming out, charging out as the hero, having rescued this child from the fire emergency. What might be the temperature of what he's got behind him if it was a real fire, not a movie fire? 1,200 degrees? 1,400 degrees? What's 1,200 degrees look like? I don't want to know. What is 1,200 degrees? When we do programs, public education programs with kids in schools, we'll ask them when mom, dad, Aunt Betty, whoever makes a cake or cooks a turkey or whatever, what temperature do they set the oven at? And I'm sorry? 350. 350, right? And usually they do pretty well with that. They'll say 350, 400 degrees. Leno and Letterman, you know, it's 1,200 degrees. No. But the oven is like 350, 400 degrees, and they pretty much have a comprehension of what that is. And then we ask, what do mom or dad or whoever do when they go to the oven to look at that turkey roasting in the oven? They open the door and they pull back, right? Why do they do that? Because the heat from that oven is too much to stand on your face. You don't want that kind of temperature at 350 or 400 degrees to be touching your skin because it hurts. Take that, multiply it by 3 to 4 times, and that's the temperature of a room on fire. So when we start talking about evacuation and escape, when we start talking about the ability to get out of a fire emergency, we need to take into account those temperatures. Why do we say crawl low to the floor? Heat rises, A little bit safer temperature down there. But even that, in 2 to 3 minutes, is unsurvivable. And we'll show you a couple of demonstrations of that in just a minute. So fire is fast, very fast. All we have time to do is escape. Fire is hot, extremely hot. A single breath of that superheated air sears your lungs and you have died. The third thing is that fire is deadly smoke and gases. Most people that die in fires die because of inhalation of the toxics in the smoke. They actually are not suffering fire impingement. They haven't been heated to the extent that caused their death. They actually die from smoke inhalation. Again, we're burning synthetic products, and literally every one of those synthetic products that burns gives off toxic gases when it decomposes. All kinds of crazy stuff. And those toxic gases slow mental processes. They cause slower physical action or movement. They cause burn, and they cause respiratory irritation and arrest. Now, in the client group where you work with your consumers, and we've already talked about that a little bit, with disabilities that already exist, how much more severe a problem is this if we start having the smoke inhalation cause a reduction in the ability to function? We've just aggravated that situation to an even greater extent. These are some of them. Carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is a colorless, odorless, tasteless gas. Many people say, oh, if there was a fire in my house, I'd wake up and I would exit my house. Probably not, because the carbon monoxide would have put you into a deeper sleep and would have, in fact, made you less likely to respond than had you not been in that fire situation. Carbon monoxide actually takes the place of oxygen and reduces the ability of the system to function. Carbon dioxide, obviously we can't breathe that. Hydrogen cyanide. Where have you heard cyanide gas before? All of the spy movies, right? When they've been caught and there's no way to escape and they can't possibly give out the message, what do? They reach in their pocket and they pop the cyanide pill. That's that stuff in a gaseous form. Hydrogen chloride, when hydrogen chloride mixes with water, which is in your respiratory system, hydrogen chloride, H2O, becomes hydrochloric acid. Not a good product to be on the inside of you. And nitrogen dioxide also has that same kind of effect of almost immediate death if it is respirated. So the biggest event, the most important event in the fire emergency is the deadly smoke and gas. And that develops with that fire progression. So as we talk about the development of fire doubling every 30 seconds, the smoke and toxic products are also developing at those kind of rates. Show you this video. This is a station nightclub, and there are a couple of things that come from this. The primary thing I want you to see is the smoke. If you remember the station nightclub, there were about 500 people on the dance floor listening to the band Great White. Great White, as part of their show, had what were referred to as cold pyrotechnics. There's no such thing as cold pyrotechnics. The reality is they were fireworks. But the theory is that when they fire, they're of such short duration and height that by the time they land on something, they have expired and there's no heat left, hence they call them cold. Great White was in the band pit, the part that we're looking at in the back there, the black, and what had happened is the material put on the wall for sound, or to control the sound, was foam material. If you've received a package in UPS or FedEx lately and you see that gray foam material with the egg carton type look to it, that's what that was. That's what they'd used for the soundproofing on the walls. The problem was that it was not fire retardant or in any way fire rated. It was just that same stuff that you'd pull out of the box from UPS, but they stuck it on the wall for the sake of absorbing sound. What happened with the cold pyrotechnics was that some of those embers landed in that foam product, caught in those lumps and caverns within that material, and because it wasn't fire treated, ignited that product on the wall. Now, a few minutes ago we talked about the foam and it being a petroleum product, solid gasoline. That's what was on the wall. For almost a minute, people who were on that dance floor, 500 people crammed into that area, thought it was part of the show and didn't understand that there was actually a fire. And if you get a chance to go to the Rhode Island Fire Marshal's office, I've got a friend down there, Vinny, who has a piece of video that was done, somebody that was inside literally from the start of this whole thing to the time when he's outside and actually walks the building. If you've seen that, it's a scary, scary thing. But picture yourself as one of 500 people in the middle of this dance floor. You think you're having a great time. You've had a couple of drinks. Everybody's just crammed in there. There's really not much room to move. Only exit you know is the one that you came in by because you haven't bothered to look for options or alternative ways out. A couple of those things are actually not available to you because of the configuration of the room and some of the things the owners have done. The band's playing, and all of a sudden you realize that this fire is not part of the show. This is an emergency, and you have to do something to try to survive. That's what's happening here. This is a recreation done by NIST, which very closely replicates, and they've had survivors come in and look at this and say, this is what it was like. Watch the time on the lower left-hand corner. The embers land in the product on the wall. Fire starts. People still, nobody's really paying any attention to the fact that this is an emergency. And if you look to the left and right along the ceiling line and right in the middle of that fire, you're already seeing the smoke. Black smoke is bad stuff. Every bit of that is toxic material. Those gases we talked about are in that smoke. When we tell kids in school, a third grade program, some of you guys that are fire guys that have done some fire prevention work, when we tell the kids in school what they need to do to escape, we tell them to crawl low under smoke, right? At a minute and a half, I defy you to get low enough to be under the smoke. Fire develops that fast. Smoke is the main event, and we have no time to do anything but escape. The same materials that burned and caused that smoke are in the place where you live and work. Deadly smoking gases are the #1 danger. They also cause reduced visibility. The fourth component, or the fourth thing about our definition of fire, is that fire is dark. Unlike the movies where you can see everything that's going on, you can easily see where the exits are, the reality is that you will not be likely to see at all or have extremely reduced visibility if a fire emergency occurs. Even exit lights. We did a program in Plattsburgh a while ago that got 3 or 4 minutes coverage on Channel 5 in Plattsburgh. And the thing that most stood out to the reporter involved in that program was how obscured their vision was because of the smoke. And we were using theatrical smoke. It was white stuff. It wasn't even beginning to be hot and dark like this. But that white smoke obscured the exit signs, and they started the news clip by Erin coming up and walking toward her cameraman with a microphone, and she was right in front of the thing before you could even tell she was there. All you had was a voice. The smoke obscures visibility. Likely will happen at night, so it's dark anyway. The likelihood of being able to see is greatly reduced. So that's one of the reasons why when we do our fire drills or when we do our fire practices, our training programs for evacuation, we need to try to simulate some of those non-visible components to be able to help consumers and staff deal with the issue that they probably will not be able to see. So fire is fast, fire is hot, fire is deadly smoking gases, and fire is dark. I'll show you this. This video is entitled Marble Mountain. And there are a couple of things that I'd like you to watch as we go through this. It takes just a few minutes. First of all, I'd like you to see there's a temperature gradient on one side of the screen where they have a floor temperature, an eye level temperature, and a ceiling temperature in the room. Notice how fast that progresses. The other side of it is a digital clock that will tell you how far into the event we are as those things occur. And then as we go into the second part, you'll also see the effect of sprinklers on the survivability of that room. So a good piece, and then we'll talk about it just a little bit after it finishes.
Human nature is kind of an interesting little beast. We tend to believe that this stuff just isn't going to happen to us.
Why you don't hear about them saving lives is because it's a non-event.
People who die, children who die, are someone's child.
Property is one thing to save, but a human life's another.
Orange County Fire Authority had a unique opportunity to show the effectiveness of residential sprinklers at a Tustin Air Station. We took two buildings that were fire loaded the same, which means the combustible material inside the buildings were as close to identical as possible. The only difference between the two was one was equipped with fire sprinklers while the other was not.
This room is furnished to represent a typical bedroom. There are pictures on the wall, drapes covering the windows, a bed with pillows and blankets, as well as other items. The fire is started in a trash can. As the fire grows, it starts to make a run up the drapes. It takes just 60 seconds to activate the smoke alarm down the hall. As the temperature rises and the toxic smoke becomes dense, your chance of survival decreases by the second. The temperature in the room has risen so fast that your next breath would sear the lining of your lungs if the toxic smoke hasn't already taken your life. Listen closely. You can hear the hallway smoke alarm melting as the fire, radiant heat, and smoke spread throughout the rest of the structure. This time, smoke and flames attract neighbors' attention.
Fire emergency. I'm walking by a residence at 6830 Super Stallion, and there's fire and smoke actually coming out of an upstairs window.
Once the 911 call has been received, it will take approximately 6 minutes until the first unit arrives on scene.
125 engine 222. We have a six-plex, two-story residence, well involved, unit on the second floor. Start second alarm.
Local Region 222, copy your request for a second alarm, six-plex well involved to Battalion 5.
It is now 13 and a half minutes into the burn, and the entire room is engulfed in flames. As firefighters enter the structure, they must first extinguish fire that has spread throughout the building, and then make their way towards the point of origin. In this room, the smoke alarm was placed in the bedroom and activates 10 seconds after ignition. In the previous burn, the smoke alarm was located in the hallway and took approximately a minute to activate. We see the same fire behavior displayed as before as it rises from the trash can and continues to grow and become hotter. As it grows and consumes the combustibles on the wall, the fire begins to roll across the ceiling. The sprinkler then activates, cooling down the room, and within minutes puts out the fire. Keep in mind, in the previous burn, the fire department didn't even arrive until 6 minutes after the 911 call.
Common sense would tell you that sprinklers are a good thing, but I had no idea of how dramatic sprinklers can be in actually putting out fires without the presence of firefighters.
What is fire? Fire is the rapid destruction of your life as you know it. From the video, at 2 minutes into the fire, did you notice, do you remember the floor temperature? The ceiling was over 1,000, about 1,100 degrees. Anybody notice the floor?
130.
Okay. At 2 minutes into the fire, the floor temperature was 216 degrees. 216 degrees. Now, we say crawl low under smoke. We say stay low because the heat is less at the floor. At 2 minutes into that normal bedroom fire, there was nothing planted, nothing dramatic about that at all. At 2 minutes into that fire, the floor temperature was 216 degrees. I went to school a really long time ago, and when I took biology class, it was probably before they had printed textbooks, I'm not sure. But when I was in school, they told me that my body is 85% what? Water, right? At 212 degrees, water does what? If I'm in that room at 2 minutes into this burn, crawling as low as I can possibly get on the floor, my body being 85% water, I am what? Boiling. I'm dead, right? 2 minutes. When a fire occurs, you have no time to do anything but escape. Evacuation plans are critical. Knowing the plan, working the plan are absolutely vital. The fire safety problem, we need to remember, if you take nothing else away from the day, You need to have your thought processes revolving around the fact that it can happen here and it can happen to you. The folks in Wells on that Saturday morning never in the world thought that they would be facing what they faced for the rest of the day and the rest of their lives. Fire is a true threat that we need to deal with. Questions, comments on this unit?